I thought this was kind of ironic. I got this bowl, a beautiful wooden bowl, from my godmother, and I'd never noticed this before, but when I turned it over, it says monkey pod. And so you'll find out what a monkey pod is today, and it was made in the Philippines. So there's the bowl, and we will begin. And I guess the first beans that we're going to talk about are the knickernuts, and these are also called sea pearls.
I'll pass them around.
Okay, and there's 3 different varieties or species. There's the gray knickernut, the brown knickernut, and the yellow one. Neither Linda or myself has the yellow one. We have plenty of brown and gray, but we do not have a yellow knickernut. So, here, you can pass these this way.
They seem to think that the yellow knickernut doesn't float as well, and that's why it doesn't spread out as much, or at least that's what I've read.
And gray, of course, is the most common, but in my collection, I have more brown than I do gray.
I do too.
And she does too. And
Wasn't there a knickernut bush or something? I remember Frank saying something
I'm
about
not
that.
ready to that.
Okay.
That's next. Okay, they grow inside a green prickly pod. And I mean, you talking about thorny? They are thorny. And there was a great specimen at the second boardwalk shower for many years, right there in the corner. But the county got rid of it because they said it was a hazard because of the thorns on it. Well, it was in a place where I don't know who would be walking right there in that corner. But we were sad. We were very sad to see that go. And then Diane found another one that was growing inside of a planter at the jetties before they remodeled and redid all that. And they also took that one. There's 2 seeds per pod. And when the pods dry out, they turn brown. And then, of course, like so many other seed pods, they crack open and then they release the seed pearls or the knickernuts. And these are often used in tropical islands in a board game like Mancala, if you know what that is. You know, my Mancala has little glass bead things, but they use those in the tropics for that. The next seed,
There's also a knickernut. Well, actually, there were 2 growing right close together at Laguna Atascosa Wildlife Refuge. And is that Bayview Drive that's closed? Is that what it's called?
Bayside?
Bayside. They were on that drive there by that big, or near that big, tall overlook. But they were on the bayside of the road. But there were 2, and they were huge. But we've never seen, Diane and I kept an eye on the one at Isla Blanca, and every time we went to Laguna Atascosa, which was not near as often, we checked. We've never seen it bloom. We've never seen any seed pods on it. So we don't know if whatever pollinates it, the insect maybe doesn't live here, or, maybe they need more than one of the, like their female and male plants. We don't know, but we've never found any seeds under them or any blooms on them. Sorry.
that's all right. Anybody know what these are?
Mango pits.
Yeah, they're mango pits. One still is very hairy, and the other one's really smooth, and it's slightly cracked open. Whether these were drift seeds that came up on the beach or from a hungry beach goer, we don't know. It could have been from a beach goer that ate one on the coast of Mexico or down by the river or what. But I've found these 2 on the beach, and as you can see, they were on the beach for quite some time because this one doesn't have any hairs on it whatsoever. and they're very light. They're about 2 to 4 inches long, and they're flat and very rigid, and like I said, they're very exposed and weathered. And they might have been dumped overboard from a boat, because I know when I used to race Hobie catamarans, I would take a mango out because our regattas, it was really hot out there, and to have something cold and juicy to eat while I was out on the boat, that was good. And yeah, I just tossed the pit over, so I don't know. So they could have come off another vessel, like a cruise ship or shrimp boat or whatever. The next one, and Linda's going to help me out with them, is the box fruit. And these are made to float as they bob along and even look like floats. The top part is the part that floats above the surface, and the bottom part is the part that floats below the surface. And I should have done a better job about taking care of this one. I left it outside, and then I saw what was becoming of it, and I took it in. But when I found it, it was a beautiful mahogany brown, and it was real shiny. They're really beautiful when they're fresh. And this is what happens to them after they they deteriorate pretty quickly. And so I have this one so that you can see what it looks like underneath. Now this one is a 3-ribbed one, and this one is a 4-ribbed one. And they even use these in some places for floats for fishing nets. And they're usually about 3 to 5 inches. And like I said, by the time they reach the beach, they're in pretty varied stages of disintegration. And finding a dark, smooth one means that it hasn't drifted for very long. Or been on the beach for a long time. And it's also known as a poison tree. Many plants are pulverized, or many parts of it are pulverized to release a fish-stunning poison when they hold them up for the nets. It was one of the first fruits to colonize Krakatoa after the explosion in 1883. And specimens can be found in Jamaica, the West Indies, Florida, the Caribbean, Yucatan, Texas, and
You told everything I was gonna.
Where are they
Except
native
that,
to?
It's native to, originally it was native to Southeast Asia,
Okay.
but apparently it's such a really good tree that it's widely distributed
in those places I
in
just
the
said.
tropical areas of the world, it said. And to me they're a pretty rare seed because they do deteriorate so fast. But here's one of the 4 ones. It did say that they have found one that washed up on the coast of Ireland. They do, England and Ireland, occasionally. One of the ladies that I'm friends with lives in Ireland, and when she finds a sea bean, she's so excited. But they do occasionally make it all the way to England and Ireland.
What does the seed inside look like?
You know, I have no idea.
Okay.
One of these days when I get one, I'll dissect it and see. But I don't know. You know, my one, you can't hear or feel anything shaking inside, but the other one you can. So, anyway, the next seed bean we're going to talk about is the porcupine seed. And, of course, the common name is derived from the spikes that are all on it. And some of them, the spikes are in disintegration, so they're worn down and just bumps on there. And sometimes these are real hard to identify, when the spikes are worn down, because you go, well, I don't see any porcupine spikes on there, so I don't really know what that is. All the ones I've ever found have spikes on them, but I have not found but 4 in all my beach time
Oh my
looking for one. Linda has one too.
I have a whole bunch.
And most of them are about an inch to an inch and a half, and they're really relatively hard. You can kind of press on here, and they're not corky like some of the shells are.
I got an example of one with a whole bunch of spiky things and one of the ones that are worn down. I'll start them over here. And if we don't get all our sea beans back, you'll be searched at the door.
I'm not gonna put this one in my pocket.
Well, perhaps some of you know about some of the seeds or beans that we've already talked about, and some of you didn't, or we hope to bring some facts out if maybe you did not know. But our next selection is the Mary's bean.
I want to say something.
Oh, before the Mary bean?
Yes, about the porcupine.
Oh, okay.
I was reading somewhere that there's actually 3 different species of the porcupines, or 3 different varieties, but they're all the brownish black, but some of them have longer spikes on them than the others. And I think you said that they're native to the tropical regions of Central, South America, and the West Indies.
Okay, our next selection is the Mary's bean, and I know I certainly covet the ones that I've found. And over the years, I've collected them. A lot of times when I bring my collections home, I have my little stash table, and sometimes I just leave them in a sack. Sometimes I put them in a bucket. Sometimes I get industrious and clean them up right away. But my Mary's beans, they always go in the house with me. I'll rinse them off, but I kept several of them that had kind of a coating on them. And somebody asked me, they said, "Oh my gosh, how did you see that?" But as shellers that have been doing this for a long time, and sea beaners that have been doing it for a long time, your eyes are trained. It's like when we search for turtle tracks. You know, some people go, "How did you even see that?" Well, it's like muscle memory or whatever. You train your eyes, and out of my peripheral vision, believe it or not, I've been along with my husband on the beach or my son-in-law and daughter, and all of a sudden I said, "Stop." And they went, "Why?" And I said, "Because there's a Mary's bean back there." And I'll go and pick it up, and they go, "How did you see that?" I said, "I don't know. My eyes just pick up on stuff like that." So I guess it just takes years of experience, and after a while you start to look for things. But I kept that one with all the crud on it to show you that it's not always going to be the beautiful Mary's bean that you see. It travels farther than most other seeds due to its durability, and it is still considered a rarity. I know one time when we had a very stormy turtle patrol, I actually found 7 in one day, and that was just amazing. I couldn't believe it. I'd go a little bit and there'd be one, and then I'd go a little bit more and there'd be another one. So it was, I was stoked. No, I didn't find any turtle tracks that day. It's also called a crucifixion bean because of its cross indented on one side. And there's color variations from black to dark brown, and some of them even have like golden highlights on them. And this bean, there's several beans that carry legends, but this is one that carries a big legend. And traditionally, it's passed from mother to daughter to ensure safe childbirth. And it's handed down for generations. And mothers that go into labor, they will clutch them in hopes of having an ease to their pain of childbirth. And like I said, I still, when I see a Mary's bean, I get really super excited, because you just don't find them very much. Let's see.
I don't know.
Is the
anything.
texture of that Mary's bean, the real brown, shimmery one, is that the same texture as the box fruit when you first found it?
No, not
Okay.
really. It's smooth, but it's not hard smooth like
Okay.
that.
Okay.
And it can be about the same color. It's a beautiful mahogany color. I've never seen one that's real dark, like those dark Mary's beans. It's more like mahogany, like reddish brown.
To me, they look like they've had varnish put on.
Yeah, yeah. So, anybody have any comments about that? How many of you have never found a Mary's bean? Oh, really?
I don't think I have.
Well, keep looking.
Gotta train our eyeballs first, you know?
Well, it's so weird, because they're about the same color as a sea heart, or about the same size as a lot of hamburger beans, or a sea purse. But I don't know, there's just something about it, and you'll never find them. Even though I found 7 that day, there were none that were like real grouped up. Where I've seen sea beans, sea hearts and hamburger beans. I've seen several of those like that are real close together, but I haven't ever seen Mary's beans that are that close together. Our next selection is the blister pod, and this has bubble-like cavities on the surface of it to give it their common name. And these little pockets are filled with air, which helps them with their flotation. And also, we call those another kind of common name is the hand grenade, for the same description as the appearance as like the World War I era hand grenades. It's a common drifter, especially after first high tides of the hurricane season. I used to see a lot of these. They would be pretty prolific, but I don't see them as much as I used to. And they can be up to 3 inches in length, and they're either that tan or mottled gray. And Pam brought one today that she found today, this morning, and she'll pass that around. And it's got most of the pods that are popped out, but it's probably darkened from still being wet. When she brought it in here, it was still damp, still wet, and it'll probably dry out to a lighter color. They come also to shore in various stages of deterioration, and of course, I always like to find one that doesn't have the blisters popped out of it. And they're dispersed within periodically flooded forests of the Amazon, and the seeds don't remain viable after they've been in an ocean voyage. They're from trees growing in the Amazon and the Orinoco River basins, and history dates them back to an illustration from 1605. Records from Devon Beach in 1884 and an Irish beach at around 1890. But the parent plant was not discovered until 1889. Now we have a special one that was found, and I will let Linda tell about that because she's the one that found it.
They named it burrowed blister pod, isn't that right? There's been 13 that have been found that they know of
In the world.
in the world. 2 in Texas. I think the other one was I think there's only been 2 in Texas. Mine and one up close to Galveston. And the way we found out about how rare they were is I posted a picture on the Sea Bean Facebook page and asked what it was, and nobody knew, but one of the ladies in Florida had found one. And they look similar to this. We'll pass this around. But on the end of it, one end is pointed, and on the other end, there's a perfect star shape. And I normally wouldn't have picked it up, because I only pick up the real pretty ones. But I picked it up and I asked Diane if she knew what it was, and she said, no, I've never seen anything like that before. So I put it on the Sea Bean page, and apparently this researcher in the Netherlands got the information, and come to find out over a period of weeks, it was discovered that 13 of them had been found. One of them had been lost. It had belonged to Kathy. What's
Kathy Katz.
Kathy Katz, who had passed away. She's the one that the Kathy's Bean is named for. But anyway, so the researcher, and I can't remember his name, I've got a copy of the botanical journal that the research information came out in, but I can't find it. But anyway, they asked us to send our beans to him. And I agreed. I said, as long as you don't cut it up, you can have it. So they cut some of them up. Mine, they did CAT scans on. And there's pictures of the CAT scan in this botanical journal, which is really, I mean, it's a 4 or 5 page article in this journal. They still don't know where they come from. There's nothing that's even closely related to it except a fossil that they had found, I think, in Africa maybe, from the either the Jurassic or the Cretaceous period. But anyway, they did all this research, and it came out in the one of the botanical journals, I think about 2015 maybe, or 2017. Yeah. I'm going to continue to look for the journal. My computer craft room, where my bookcase is, looks like a bomb exploded in it right now, but if I can find it, I'll bring it and y'all can read the article. It was very interesting.
Tell where yours is.
Yeah, and I had asked them to be sure and don't cut mine up because I'd like to have it back. Well, I think I may have talked to Tony about it, or I talked to Frank about keeping it down here since it was found down here. And I believe that Frank said, he said there's really no safe place that you could depend on since it's such a rare seed. So I had mine sent to to BRIT. It's the Botanical Research Institute of Texas. And it's a huge seed bank at the Botanical Garden in Fort Worth. And I had the privilege, Barney Lipscomb is the guy that was over it at that time, and he took me on a tour. And it's the coolest place. It's just these big room after room with drawers and climate controlled with seeds in them. So that's where mine is right now.
Where did you find it?
I don't remember. I think it was at
here.
Boca Chica Beach.
Boca Chica?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
It's been more than a week ago, so.
Our next bean is the bay bean, and it's most plentiful and very familiar, but you may not be familiar with it. They grow abundantly in Florida in the dune vines, and pods grow along the sand, and they're easily spotted at the dune line. And these plants help stabilize the dune and protect the dunes and the sand. The pods are thick and leathery and remaining green until summer dries them out. And then, like so many other drift seeds and beans, they crack open and release 10 or so hard beans. And the coloration varies from mottled to very variable browns and shades of rust. And I did not know this factoid, that bay beans are eaten by few insects because they have an imposter amino acid, that's a protein building block, that interferes with the insect's protein metabolism. So they come from thick green pods, 8 to 10 centimeters long. Each pod comes with about 5 to 7 seeds, and they grow on both coasts of Florida and from the Gulf of Mexico to the American tropics. And the first time I ever saw them, I thought they were some kind of like pinto bean or some kind of bean that you would just cook. And I guess you can cook them. Doesn't say they're poisonous. I have never done that, but anyway, I thought that interesting fact about the insects don't bother them because of the amino acid in them. The next one is a prickly palm, and there are 3 distinct and equally spaced holes around the widest part of the ball, making the seed easily to separate from many other similar palm nuts. Usually they're dark brown or black and very hard. They're typically about an inch or less in diameter, and under a test they can float up to about 15 years. The palm-bearing spines, especially on trunks, and hence the name prickly palm. The pores trap the air. You would think that because they have these little holes, these pores, that would suck in water, but it actually traps the air, and drift specimens have been recorded for Yucatan, Padre and Mustang Islands in Texas, Myrtle Beach region, and Florida on the East Coast. And nowhere on these beaches can it be called common. The same is true for Europe. And they're used a lot in sea bean jewelry. This one has secreted some of its oil because it's still on there, and I had to wipe it out of my little case like this. I was going, what is that? But it was underneath that one.
If you leave them in your pocket, they'll stain it.
Well, I got another story when we do the other palm nut. These are cohune palms, or sometimes they call them monkey pods. Remember the bowl down there? They bear clusters of egg-sized fruits, and their time at seed leaves only a blackish nut about 2 inches. They're worn through to a tan or woody endocarp, and its 3 cocoid pores are often replaced by a ragged hole. And you can see where this one, I love to look at them because they have comical little monkey faces, but this one, the holes have opened up, and this is what they're talking about, how the deterioration kind of makes that bigger hole in there. And under test conditions, they can float up to 7 years. And during World War I, this is the interesting factoid. During World War I, there were seeds on European beaches, and they were shipped to England to be turned into charcoal for the use in gas masks. And they're found in lowland forests from Mexico southward through Central America. And these trees have large clusters of fruit. From 800 to 1,000 hang from trees that are about 15 meters tall. So it's a ginormous tree, and the fruit clusters. And the drift specimens are not viable.
It amazes me that these researchers have the time and the space to set up tanks to float these seeds for 15 years.
Or longer.
Or
Like
longer.
A sea heart can float for up to 30 years.
Wow.
Hamburger beans and sea hearts. This is called a calabash. It's not somebody's play ball that was found on the beach. I had another one of these that you could hear the seeds inside. I have not heard the seeds inside, but it's pretty dried out. It looks like it's not, but I've had it for a number of years. I had my other one at school, which was a mistake because one time when I was absent, some boys got it down and cracked it open, and I cried. Anyway, the factoid about these is all the ones I've ever found are about this size, but they can be as the size of a basketball. And so that was kind of interesting. They have a hard shell, which is up to 2 millimeters thick. And there's another species that's smaller, and the shell is only about 1 millimeter thick. And they range from tan to brownish gray, kind of a yellowish also. They're found throughout the American tropics and as far north as the Florida Keys. They contain pulp, as they're part of the squash family, and seeds, and the fruits grow on short stalks on the trunk, and also they hang from the branches. And they are often planted as ornamentals and for a fruit source, and serve as implements for bowls and balers. You know, I'm sure the bigger ones, like up to a basketball size, you could bail out your lancha, you know, when you needed to. And the max flotation under those is 14 and a half years.
It kind of felt like a gourd.
Yeah.
That's how.
I've got several of those, and mine are almost identical in size and color to that one.
When you find a one that's not dried out, are they the ones that kind of sometimes will rot and just really, really foul?
I've gotten some, and I've even gotten them home, but then they collapse like a gourd would, if it gets too wet or too much humidity. And I found them on the beach when they were smashed, not by a car or vehicle, just rot, just makes them collapse. In fact, I've only found like 4 ever. The one that got cracked at my school, and this one, and 2 more that I don't know what happened to them. So, well, one of them did. One of them collapsed after I got it home. But anyway.
Foul is not even the word
Yeah.
you could use. It's worse than that.
Yeah.
I found one time, and apparently I brought it home, and it got worse and worse. It's not in my collection anymore.
Give it to the boys.
I'm going to get a verification on this. I think this is what it is, but I'm going to ask Barbara to give me a positive ID. Do you know what it is?
A walnut?
Well, you're close. Well, it's supposed to be a kukui nut.
Oh.
wow.
Okay, and they call these candle nuts, and they have a walnut shape
Okay.
and form, and typically they're black with a waxy sheen, and they are stone hard. I mean, they are one of the hardest sea beans that I've ever felt. They have commercial value from tropical Asia and Pacific islands, and they were widely introduced into warmer parts of the world because of their dispersion. They have a furrowed seed coat and may be inky black or almost white. That's what I've never seen a white one before. Now, the white ones retain fruit tissues. They have from 1 to 3 seeds in the nuts, and inside is an oily kernel, and you can feel that one. It has some oil on the outer surface, and it's also used in sea bean jewelry, and because they call it a candle nut, they're used for oil to illuminate, as in a candle. They're found a lot in Hawaii. When cooked, the kernels are edible, but uncooked They're poisonous. They tend to leak oil when they're in your collections. And if you feel on that one, it does have an oily surface. This next sea bean, I used to have 3 different stages of it. I do not know what happened to the other 2, but I do have a most complete one right here. It's manchineel. And these drop from trees as yellow, fleshy, flattened globes. And they arrive on beaches like this one, very corky. They're tan in various stages of in disintegration, and they're ranging from slightly wrinkled to a skeletal endocarp. And that's what I had, was the skeleton of one of those. And I didn't know what it was, and Diane Ballesteros told me what it was. They're poisonous when fresh, but harmless after drifting. So, there you go. A lot of you South Texans know what this is. Native plant people.
Coral bean.
A coral bean. Okay, and this is off my coral bean tree, bush, whatever you want to call it, shrub. And I kept this because I do nature sketching, and I wanted to show these that came out of the pod, what the pod looks like when it's all dried out. When it's first formed on the tree, they're really green. And I've got 3 here, and I saved the beans. I saved them for the Native Plant Center for propagation. We furnished seeds for somewhere that were growing native plants. And they are poisonous, so when I make jewelry out of them, I coat them and seal them up. But the flower of these is gorgeous. If you've ever seen one, it looks like a little pink to deep scarlet Christmas tree, the bloom. And they have the oval hilum is slightly offset from the center, and most of them are all glossy. You know, when you pick them up, unless they've got mud on them, you know, from the ground. But if you get them off the tree, they're already really glossy in that pod. And they also are stone hard, and I use my little Dremel drill to make holes in them to make jewelry out of them. And they come from a herbaceous tree growing along the southern U.S. coastline, and there's a lot of them around here. They're planted. They used to have tons of them down at the convention center, but they removed a bunch of those. I don't know why. I thought mine might have frozen back when we had the big freeze in 2020, but it made it back, and it's pretty hardy. Under a test, it can float up to 15 months, and it's even capable of making a transatlantic journey. And they do make really attractive jewelry, and I have a necklace at home that has some on it.
There's also a hybrid variety that the tree is the same form. The bloom spikes are much larger, and they're kind of a fire engine red. And they're root hardy as far as Fort Worth, because there's some at the Botanic Garden, some of the hybrid ones. They die back every winter. Mm-hmm. And even year before last, when it was so cold down here, it got -4 at my brother's house.
Wow.
And he has one, but it came back from the root.
Don't they have the hybrids at the Eco Center? I think they do.
I don't know.
Yeah, because the blooms last a lot longer.
Yeah, mine are more like pinkish to a lighter red.
Wow.
But I know David Losey has one in his yard, and man, it is like fire engine red all over. And my blooms are about like that. They're about maybe 4 inches tall.
The bloom spikes on the hybrids, mine are about this long, but they do not produce seeds. I've had mine close to 15 years now, and it's never produced seeds.
Well, my friend on the island has one. Of course, they've lived there for 50 years, and the trunk on hers is about like
Oh
this.
my God.
So my trunk is about, my main trunk is about like this, but hers is huge. It's ginormous.
Did you plant it?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I did.
Nice.
I didn't plant it from a seed. I planted it from one that came up, but it was like tiny when I put it in the ground. And the first few years, I thought, oh gosh, I had a yellow sephora there, and something got in it systemically, and one day it was beautiful, and the next day it was like dead. And so I was scared to plant it in that spot, but so far it's made it.
How long do you have it?
I guess mine is about 10 years old. And it's already, and then once it started shooting up, oh my gosh, it just went, whoosh, and mine's probably about 12 feet tall.
Wow.
So, and it produces more beans now also, so.
And you can buy the native ones at Mike Heaps, and Grimsell's also has them, the native. And I think my brother bought one from Mike Heap, and he paid, I believe, $5 for it. And it was about this tall, a nice, really nice one.
I think I got mine from somebody in Texas Master Naturalist, maybe even Frank, but it's been about 10 years ago. Anyway, this next bean is the water hickory, and these are common drifters, and they're pretty much in abundance in the fall, and they come from local growing hickory trees that have dropped fruit in nearby waterways, especially in the Mississippi River, and I know they have a bunch of them in East Texas, because my grandparents had those in their yard. The next one is something that you might be unfamiliar with, and it's called the black macuna. If you know anything about the hamburger bean is a macuna. But these are really weird because it looks like somebody ran over them. These are flattened, they're hard, black seeds with a roughened, dimple, deflated appearance. The general size of about a quarter. The thin protruding hilum, that's the seam, is easily felt along the edge. Black macunas come to us thanks to, I want to say commissary's long-tongued bat, a tiny flying mammal the size of a hummingbird. The sea bean's flower, a unique echo reflector that makes it conspicuous to the bat's sonar. Bats landing on the flower are rewarded with an explosion of nectar, and the plant is rewarded with pollen from another flower. And I just thought that was amazing. I never knew that, and for the longest time, I didn't know what one of those was until I looked up in my book. I said, when I found the first one, I thought somebody had run over it. Like you find sea hearts that big old trucks run over. But then I found another one, and I said, surely, what it would be the coincidence, because it was way back in the dunes. Not that it couldn't have been run over, but I said, I think this is just the way this sea bean is. And sure enough, when I looked it up, that's what it is.
And some years, well, I found that they're never really common. Do you think, you don't?
No, I don't see them.
But some
very
years
often.
you'll find 2 or 3 or 4, and then maybe for 2 or 3 years you won't find a one.
They're not prolific, let's just
Yeah.
say that. Not like hamburger beans. The next one is walnut. And there are 4 species brought to our shores by offshore currents, and I only have 2. there's the white, the tropical Jamaican, the black, and the familiar English walnut, which you can buy in a store, grocery store. They're about 1.5 to 2 inches. Can you eat them? They are as edible as any knot that has been soaking in salt water for many months. So if you want to try eating one, go ahead, but I don't think I would want to. And they have a hard, wrinkled surface, and they're indented at one end and bluntly pointed at the other. And colors vary between black and light gray, and you'll see 2 of them that I have. They're 2 different species. The black, brownish gray to black, common north of Florida from Texas to New York. This next one is the Calatola. It's often confused with tropical almonds because of the size and shape. These are more sharply sculpted and much harder, and they're much rarer on U.S. coast. I think I've only found like 2 or 3 of these.
That's what that is?
Yeah,
What's the name of it again?
Calatola, Calatola. They're known from South America and the highlands of Costa Rica and northwest Panama, and they're moderately common on the Pacific coast, beaches, and the maximum flotation under test conditions is about 5 years.
Yeah, yeah.
The next one is the country almond. These are commonly found at various stages of deterioration, and they're light in color and very light in weight. And while drifting, they lose that smooth outer covering. Linda's got one that has the outer covering on it. And then this is what they look like on the inside with the exposed threads surrounding like a corky interior.
We've actually got about 3 stages. We've got the one that's real fresh, then the other
Yeah.
one of mine
It's
is,
before the threads start showing.
right, is not quite as deteriorated. And I have seen them that are even more deteriorated than that.
And, you know, we have a lot of these on the beach because there are a lot of almond trees on the coast of Mexico, on the Gulf of Mexico side and on the west coast. And you see them, they're beautiful trees, they're big. And next time I see one in the really green stage, I'm gonna pick it because I wanna keep that. And then of course that one that has the real brown coating, that's the next stage. And like Linda says, or you know, you can find them in all those stages on the beach. The next one, I just love these, and when I first saw them, I thought, what is that? And they're the thorns from an acacia tree. And even though they're not a bean, I decided to bring it because they're really fascinating. And one of them has one pointy end, and the other one, the other point is kind of, it just didn't develop into a point. But the other specimen I have has the 2 really pointy sides. They're fork-shaped and somewhat slender and pointed on 2 ends, and they're highly prized by collectors. I did not know that until I was doing my research. And they're from the bull's horn acacia, aptly named because they do look like horns.
You found them here?
Uh-huh.
They
In
grow
fact,
in
I
Mexico.
saw a program on TV within the last month that showed the green ones that were on, and they're soft when they're green.
Ants like to live in them too after I guess they bore into them, and then when they harden, there's usually a little hole in them.
I believe it. There's so many things that bore holes in these seeds, you know. In fact, in one of my cases that I have like this, I found all kinds of like little bugs down in there. You know, that probably came out of some of those seeds after they bored a hole in there. This next one, I thought it was kind of, I didn't even know what it was. I saw it on the beach, and one side looks kind of indescript, but the other side has this little veiny parts on it. And this is called bloodwood. It's a light fibrous disc, and it blends so well into a sandy background, they're often overlooked. In fact, when I saw this one, I didn't really know what it was, but as I picked it up and looked at it, if it had been years ago, I'd have just probably kicked it with my foot or not even bothered with it, but I did pick it up. They come from a large tropical tree found behind mangrove swamps, and sometimes they're called dragon's blood tree. It gets its name from the blood-like sap that exudes from the trunk when it's cut with a sharp instrument. When the sap solidifies, it is turned into a kind of a red resin, which was formerly used for medical purposes. I don't know what kind of medical condition, but it said medical purposes. And it has a wide range in Central America, West Indies, and southward toward Brazil. And the seed comes from a fruit which is usually asymmetrical, but can be circular, Indehiscent.
Indistinct?
Indehiscent.
Into what?
Indehiscent pod.
Oh.
From 3 to 8 centimeters long, or 1 centimeter or less thick. And a single seed within the fruit loses its viability on exposure to seawater. And they're recorded in all Yucatan beaches, Padre Island, and Gran Terre, Louisiana, on the Gulf Coast. And the max flotation is about 1 year. You can see it's very corky and looks pretty fragile, so those seeds don't last very long.
Do you wanna know what that word means?
I
Does
look-
not split open to release the seeds. when
Right.
Enclosed, I guess, is that?
So dehiscent, like, splits open and throws them out, so I didn't even know indehiscent, but.
Yeah, and collecting, I learned from Christina to put those little organdy bags over them so that you can collect the seeds without them, dispersing on the ground.
Right, and the Caesalpinia, like, if you have it on your dash in the heat, it just like, sounds like.
Sounds like you know that.
I did.
I had mine in a brown paper bag, and I was going down the road, and all of a sudden I hear something like popcorn in the back seat. And it was the seeds popping in that paper bag.
They throw, like, they really.
But you can hear them and all.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, they come out with force.
Caesalpinia? They grow, Ramsey, that's why I know what they are.
They have yellow blooms. Anyway, this is an interesting little seed. It's from a lantern tree, and it looks like a little lantern. It's found in many world beaches, primarily a Pacific and East Asian species, and the max flotation under test is about 3 years. Looks like it could float for more, but it's pretty small. They're used a lot in jewelry, and due to its capability to have a high sheen on it. Everybody likes that prettiness of getting all polished up. So those make great items for jewelry. I forgot to send this around. When we were talking about the walnut, this is what the walnut will look like inside. This is one of the species of walnuts out of the 4. You can see the seeds and how the inner part looks. This one, a lot of you native plant people know where this comes from. It's kind of unmistakable, but inside is what people don't recognize because it's very tiny. This comes from the yellow Sephora tomentosa, okay? And some people call this mermaid pearls, or they call it necklace pod. Anyway, that's the seed pod, and I can see, I mean, I immediately know when I see those pods what they are. They're green when they start off, and then as they age, they get brown and a little bit harder. But I can see the inside seed is yellow, and people might mistake it for a nurdle, if you know what nurdles are. They're those little round pellets of plastic that you find on the beach. And they're easily overlooked by collectors because, I mean, they're so hard to see for one thing, and people just don't know what they are. And they come from a shrub or a small tree known as the yellow Sephora. And they're found in the West Indies, coastal regions of Mexico, southern Texas, southeast Florida, and also in Africa, Asia, and the islands in the Pacific due to the pantropic distribution of them. The seeds remain viable even after long ocean voyages. Pods that reach the shore are unmistakable, but yellow pea-like seeds are hard to see and rare in collections. And I think Linda is going to do the next.
Yeah, I'm gonna do Little Marble. I didn't do
Yeah.
other than bring the,
Okay. Well, the other one we're talking about is the one that looks like a hamburger bean. And if you've ever been on the Sea Bean Facebook page or looking in there, they call these TBM, thick banded mucuna. And this is a hamburger bean, but it's a different species because it has a very wide, thick black.
and most of them look like they're on steroids
Yeah.
because they're a whole lot bigger than your regular hamburger.
Oh, yeah.
This is my prize.
Oh, I know you showed me.
I know.
That's some big ones.
Now, it was found, I know for positive, at Boca Chica Beach. And I think the last bean that we're gonna talk about, and after we finish, y'all are welcome to come and look at the different, because we have some beans that we didn't talk about, couldn't talk about everything, but you're welcome to come look at our specimens. I'm gonna talk about the little marble. I guess it's next to the Kathy's bean. Would you say it's the most rare? And the one that I found that were only 13. It's little tiny, and I'm not gonna pass them around. It comes from a herbaceous vine in southern Mexico to western Colombia. It also is on the, I believe the Pacific coast of Costa Rica. They say that they just are abundant on the Pacific coast of Costa Rica. And in all of the years of collecting, I found 4.
I have one.
And I think Diane had 2 or 3. So, and I don't know how long Diane had been collecting. I've been collecting since avidly only about 20 years, but I've been collecting since in the 50s, late 50s. But anyway, and I think possibly they might not be as rare because a lot of times you find them in the really woody rack, and you could miss them because it's not like they're gonna jump out at you and bite you on the leg.
They pretty much look like a common palm seed, except the hilum is very distinctive on there. It's almost like a gray to a yellowish.
Be sure and come look at them.
Yeah, look at those.
But like I say, they're found in the Gulf of Mexico, Florida's east coast, and then along the Pacific coast of Costa Rica. and under test conditions, they float 2 years, and that may be another reason, since they don't float as long as some of the seeds. But they're real shiny black to dark brown, and usually a half, 3/4 of an inch would be a huge one. And that's about all of the information really that I had on it. But we do invite you to come look. This is a antidote vine, and they're not very common either. We have a specimen of a golf ball that still has its outer seed coat on it. And then just, you're welcome to look. I have the Jamaican spurge. I don't find these very often, do you?
I have 3.
Well, I have 3 too.
You don't find them very often.
And then some ear pods, and mine are pretty deteriorated. But you're welcome to come look. I do have a Kathy's bean necklace that our friend Diane got me when she went to Cuba. And I'm sorry to say the beans over time have darkened. When I first got it, they were bright red. And this is one of the really rare sea beans. But
Yes.
oh yes, this is a heart bean pod. It's not the exact species that grows here, but the heart beans that we see here, not grow here. But the ones that grow in Mexico, some of them are like 3 feet long. I've seen pictures. But this is what the pod does look like.
And the pods are from vines that are 100 to 150 feet long.
Huge vines.
And they, when they have floods in Mexico and Central America, the trees fall into the river, and then that's how the pods, wind up in the river. I've seen a sea heart pod one time at the mouth of the Boca Chica in the Gulf of Mexico. I went out with a friend of ours that's a fishing guide, and he goes, "Hey, hand me my gaff," and I handed it to him, and it was one of these.
Wow.
And I'd never seen one before, and he said, "You know what that is?" And I said, "No." And he said, "You know those sea hearts that you collect?" He said, "That's what's inside of that pod." And I had never seen a pod ever until Diane, except for that one, when Diane brought this one to our meeting. And also hamburger beans. I also found those on the beach, like where the shores is now. There used to be a white picket fence, and we had high tide one time, and the hamburger beans were still on the vine, and that's the only time I've ever seen that. Anybody have any questions? Linda and I took a lot of our information from this book, which is a great book, and I also had this, and I had this one that was written by Kathy Katz and another gentleman. Kathy was a great sea bean expert in Florida, and she passed away. And she wrote this little book, but it's got a lot of neat information in it. And I thought, oh, that's cute, a little book. But I'm telling you, the illustrations and the information in here were great. And I used to take this with me because it was pocket size, and I'm sure that's probably what she had in mind when she did this book. But the shells, unless we have a pretty big storm, which we just got through having, or hurricane, you just don't find the shells like you used to, except in a rare occasion. I would say when I was a girl, beachcombing. And so I kind of gave up on shelling, except after a big storm. because you'd go along and you'd never see anything. And so, when I learned about sea beans and drift seeds, I found sea hearts when I was a kid. And I always thought it was fascinating to find sea hearts and hamburger beans, but because I didn't know about some of the other ones, I didn't know to pick them up or to collect them. See, a lot of coconuts, and there were beans that we didn't necessarily go into because y'all already know a lot about those, like the sea hearts and the hamburger beans and more common ones that are found. The golf balls, sometimes they're everywhere, but a lot of people never see them in their outer encasement like this. And so anyway, we decided to bring some that you may have known about, but we threw in some interesting facts, and then some that were more not familiar to you.
I have a question. Picking them up and bringing them home, what do you clean them with before you bring them into your house, or do you? Somebody mentioned, that there's holes and there's bugs and stuff. You want to kill those before you bring them in your house, right?
Well, I usually give mine a wash outside, and then spread them out and let them dry out, and I put them in airtight containers. Some I don't. Some of them I just, give a quick rinse off. And like Tony said, I had a star nut palm, and it was so beautiful. I didn't want to put it with the rest of my stuff and maybe ruin it or whatever, lose it or whatever. And so I put it in my pocket on Turtle Patrol, and it was really hot that day. And when I got home to take a shower, I had a huge, big red thing that turned into a blister from the oil burning my leg. And so I knew better than to do that again. When I pulled it out, there was still oil that was like seeping out. And I said, it's a palm seed. It's got oil in it. And so, and it didn't come out of my pants. The oil, I could not get it out. I used Dawn, I used Shout, I used all kinds of stuff, and it would not take it out. And that splotch was a reminder not to put a star nut palm or any of those palms that had that hole in them, like a prickly palm. It seeps oil too. So, but a lot of them, there's fine little tiny grains of sand in there, and it's not unusual for sand to come out of them later. And that's why I put them in containers. I don't just have them out, on my furniture or on shelves or something. I might have them in a ceramic dish or a bowl or some kind of clear, container, glass container, to be, admired.
I mean, when you say you wash them, do you soak them in bleach or?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I just give them a good wash, but I use one of those green scrubby pads to take off some of that stuff, and then, those fingernail kits you used to get with a little zipper, the little file in there with a point on it. Those work great to take off some of that scum that's on some of the beans that I have. And I also use a little bit of real fine sandpaper. Now, if you get into polishing, some people have polishers, and they use walnut shells, to polish their sea beans. But sometimes you have to leave them in there a month, polishing a month. Day, 24/7. Or longer. Yeah. A friend of mine that used to live on the island, Martha Florian, her husband polished all her beans, and then she made jewelry, these beautiful necklaces, and put turquoise and all this other stuff on them. And they were just mirror sheen on them. They were gorgeous. And she had hamburger beans, and she had sea hearts. And I know her husband, he would polish and polish and polish those. Some people say use Brasso, that the native peoples in tropical areas, they found out some American came down there with Brasso for whatever reason, and they use Brasso and one of those green scrubby pads. So,
600 grit sandpaper, but it takes a long time.
oh, right, and
I've
a
got
lot of
one that
patience.
I think it was even smaller grit than that.
800, yeah,
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
Her name was, what was Diane's, the other Diane that lived in Indiana?
Brown.
Brown, Diane
Yeah.
Brown. She polished this one and she ordered some kind of sandpaper. It was kind of like cloth, and I think it was like 1,000 grit. And it took her like 2 weeks still to polish this heart.
But, you know, some years you can find them and they're already perfectly polished on the beach. They look like you bought them in a store or whatever. And then you find, like, I remember one year, just a few years ago, every sea heart I picked up had crud all over it and tons of barnacles. They were just nasty. And I finally, you know, I would polish it or work with it and try to get that stuff off of it. But it took a lot of elbow grease to clean them up. And that wasn't even polishing up. That was just taking the barnacles off and, you know, that's whatever that glue is that comes out of the barnacle. That's so strong. They use it in the aircraft industry. It takes a lot to get that stuff off.
I use a ceramic tool on mine a lot.
Oh, yeah.
To take it's got a little sharp, crooked metal thing on one end and then a blade on the other end. And it works real well.
Yeah,
You
I've
get
used
the-
pocket knife,
Does
X-Acto knife.
muriatic acid hurt them? Like muriatic acid doesn't hurt a shell if you wanna get some of that green crud off of it. You
I
gotta
don't,
dip it and rinse it quickly.
yeah, I don't think that you could put muriatic acid on a sea bean.
I don't know, I've never tried it.
I-
Shells, it works fine on shells.
Yeah, it does, but also you gotta know what you're doing when you use it. And where do you dispose that?
Yeah, that's my question. Where do you get
Where
rid
do
of
you
it?
dispose muriatic acid?
Dilution is the solution.
I mean, do you
Just
throw it in
dilute
the bay?
You can put it in the water and it'll dilute
Yeah,
it.
you
They used
put
to
water
dump
with it and it just
hydrochloric
goes
acid
away.
off of Savannah, Georgia. Full strength hydrochloric acid.
Wow.
So if because I haven't ever dipped my shells in muriatic acid because of my question is what do I do with it after I get through? So I can just.
I'm not gonna say pour it in the ocean. I'm just telling you what they did at one time. They probably
Tony
still do.
Reisinger of Seagrams
Don't
said,
you dare.
No, I'm not. That's been my question, you know, like what do you do? I mean, I know they use it to clean pools and stuff with,
Yeah,
you know, but.
and it goes down drains. It
Right.
gets diluted.
I just didn't wanna pour it down the drain of my condo.
Probably clean it out.
Clean it out.
It might eat the pipes out.
and I
No,
did
it
bring,
mixes with water.
I did bring 5 beans that were kind of unusual. This is actually a sea heart, but it's the most unusual shape. And now, you know that I've collected so many, now I'm looking for the smallest one I can get, or the smallest hamburger, or the smallest sea purse, and also the largest one. I know a lot of you were here and at the Coastal Studies Lab when I brought that big bag of brain beans. And I didn't bring that today. I guess I should have brought one of those because they are unusual. And it's very unusual for you to get one that's in good shape because they deteriorate very quickly like the box fruit does. And this, we've been undecided about what this is. And I think this is really a monkey pod or some type of palm seed, but it's so weird shape and it just has such weird markings on it. And this one, we decided was a sea heart, but for whatever reason, it's got that deflation going on. I don't know if it was soft and soggy and something ran over it, or if this just the way it turned out. You know, it was like a deformity or something. So I don't know. I'll leave these up here also. But thank you.
Thank you. Excellent.
Great. Very good. Thank you.
So there's plenty more.
Thank